Okay. Hello, my name is Sabrina Mijares,
And I'm Derick Gomez.
and we're here on behalf of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program for the Gainesville Eight project.
And let's start. So, what's your full name?
Donald Patrick Perdue.
Okay. And where were you born and when?
Actually, I was born in Detroit, Michigan, May 28, 1949. And my parents moved to South Florida, Hollywood, actually, I think, from the best I've been able to tell, around a year old. So for a long time, until I was about 12 years old, I thought I was born in Florida. Because I was so young when I came.
And did you grow up in a military family?
No.
No. Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about your family background and how that influenced you going into the war?
Okay, as I mentioned, I grew up in Hollywood, Florida. At the time, I thought I had two parents, but apparently my mother had left her husband and my father when I was little and went to South Florida, and she married another man that became my stepfather, and he had a drinking problem, and I didn't know that, quite a bad drinking problem, and I didn't know my mother also had a drinking problem. She was like the good guy and he was the bad guy. We ended up, and when I was little, I think around 8 years old, we just left and went up to Massachusetts, Springfield, Mass, for a year, not quite a year, to be with my sister, to get away from my stepfather. And I guess my mother must have divorced him at that point. And then we went back down to Hollywood again, and we lived in a town right next to Hollywood called Hollandale, and went through elementary school and high school. And how much detail do you need, and how far do you want me to go?
However much you want to get.
Okay, my mother, prior to leaving to go up to Massachusetts, had really not worked. She was just a housewife, and back then, and she had been an orphan growing up for a while, and in Detroit in Canada, across from Detroit. And so she had no real skills, and she had not finished high school. I think she went to 5th grade, something like that. And so, I mean, she could read and write, but she was deficient in the skills to get a good jobs. So she worked as a barmaid when we came back. So money was tight, so we didn't have a lot of money. And when I was 12, I actually started working. And I worked at a bar that she worked at, but I worked in the back, cleaning up the place at night after everybody left and that, and then I worked in the kitchen washing dishes and stuff, and so I did that all through high school, plus on the weekends I'd work in a gas station. And she had a very strong work ethic, even though she didn't make much money, but she sort of like instilled in my brother and I, and we both had paper routes and sold newspapers and things like that. And high school didn't mean much to me other than getting out of high school. That was all. I didn't take it very seriously. After I got out of high school, I guess within a year, I had got, the Vietnam era was pretty big, and I got noticed to take a physical. I didn't get drafted yet, but let me jump back a little bit. When I was in my last year of high school, I went to the Marine Corps recruiter, and I tried to join the Marine Corps because I had an uncle. It turned out he really wasn't my uncle, but I thought he was my uncle. That had been in the Marine Corps during the Korean War, and I really admired him in that, and I thought, well, that'd be a good thing. And he had told me stories, so I thought, well, I wanted to join the Marine Corps, and they wouldn't take me. They said that, go back and finish high school and that, and because I was, I guess, 17. I just turned 17 when I went there, and they said no. And so I finished high school, and then I got noticed for a physical, and the big drafts were coming in. So I knew they were coming. So when I went to the physical, they said that we need volunteers for the Marine Corps. And normally, when you went in the service without getting drafted, you were there for 4 years. But because of that, it was not draft. It was like the draft, but it wasn't. But I could go in for 2 years. So I said, well, I'll volunteer for the Marine Corps for the 2 years, and so that's how I ended up in the Marine Corps.
And you said that your uncle was in the Marine Corps and that you really admired.
Well, he really wasn't my uncle.
Okay.
It turned out he was a
All right.
family friend that I, grew up calling him uncle and that. But yes.
But that you really admired, like, what he talked about. What was it that you admired? What was it that you saw in the Marine Corps?
Well, one is, and which I saw myself later on, was the camaraderie and the, in a war, in a true war combat situation, you really have to depend on each other. And there's few types of jobs in civilian life that dependable. Maybe police or fire have that, but you're very dependent on that person to not only protect and help you, but to do what they're supposed to do. And the Marine Corps was real big on those type of things. And also, even though, in reality, the organization really stresses honor. You've probably seen the commercials with all these type of things.
Right.
I mean, you'd like to think everybody in the Marine Corps was like that. It's not really true. Some of them are not very nice people. But, you have these ideals in that. And so he was a very fit guy that I knew. He was always in shape and that, and he boxed a little bit and stuff. So I always admired that kind of stuff. And because of the type of environment where my brother and I have a twin brother, he's not an identical twin, but he ended up went in the Navy. But excuse me. When you live in lower income areas, it's sort of a little bit tougher than like now middle class neighborhoods I live in. My wife really can't relate to where like I used to live. I mean, it wasn't that it's bad. And everybody talks about all the gangs in New York and stuff like that, but South Florida has gangs and stuff. And I mean, I knew people, pretty rough people at those times and that and stuff. But I sort of tried to stay out of it as much as I could, and not, it's been very easy to get pulled into that. One of my best friends, when we were 12 years old, he got shot and killed. At the time, it didn't seem like that big a deal to me, but now when as I've gotten older and you talk to people and kids and that, I mean, that's big and I know some places like Chicago, it happens all the time in different places, but that's pretty big. Most kids don't experience those kind of things, and then when I went into the service, I saw a lot more death than most people would see, even normal, and so those things all have some kind of an impact on you. I like to think that it was more positive, even though it's not. I mean, don't misinterpret what I'm saying. It's not a good thing to see a lot of dead people, but you can either let it really hurt you or negatively, or you can take and have a positive effect on you. And so that's why I like to think that it had things that were negative in my life had a positive effect into me. One of the reasons my mom left my stepfather was he was very abusive, and when she actually left him was shortly after he had taken a gin bottle to me and broke a gin bottle on me in that, and it injured me in that. And so the court, the law enforcement, that was the first time, nowadays they probably come in a lot quicker. Although reading the headlines in the paper, I don't know anymore nowadays. You would think that Child Protective Services would be better than they are. And but so at that point they had given her a court order to keep him away from the family, and that's when she decided to go up to where my sister was living in Massachusetts at the time, and take me up there. And I remember we went in the middle of the night on a train. That was really exciting to me, and I was 8 years old, and maybe eight or nine, right in that area. And I remember we got to Springfield, Mass on the train, and we got off the train. I had a little light nylon jacket that you wear in Florida, and there was like 6 feet of snow outside.
Oh, gosh.
It was a very interesting experience, and but so we lived up not quite a year up there, and I went to school in Springfield during that period of time, and so that was a different experience. And I'm sorry, I got off on a tangent. I was just trying to give you some background.
No, this is good. It gets the flow of talking. So what was your perspective of the war when you were joining the Marine Corps?
Well, yeah, I didn't know much about Vietnam. I mean, I was catching a little bit on the news, but I was, it was a very limited focus, other than the fact that I knew that, well, I could get drafted and ended up over there.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually felt bad when it came, as I was getting closer to actually being in the service, that I knew so little about what was going on in Vietnam. And I would start watching the TV really a lot and listen to the radio about what was going on. And at that period of time, it was a lot of activity. It was one of the most intense part of the war. And so it's like, and I was apprehensive, but in a way I wasn't. At the same time, I was excited. I don't know if you can say, it's like going out to do something that's sort of scary, but you want to do it right away. You're not going to let that stop you. And I was concerned about that, but at the same time, I really didn't understand a lot of things, and I didn't understand from the government side why we were really there, other than for some reason our government felt we needed to go help those people in Vietnam, and we were going to save them or whatever. And when you get into the Marine Corps, I mean, you get indoctrinated. I mean, I don't know, almost like brainwashed. I can't really say it's brainwashing, but probably the same type of general approach. And I remember when I got finished with boot camp and all that sort of stuff, and I didn't have an opportunity to come home before I had to go on to the other things. But I remember they were looking at assignments were coming. They were going to tell you where you were going to go, whether you're going to go to Vietnam or what. And I remember I was so worried that I wouldn't get sent to Vietnam. And there was a few guys that there's no way they wanted to go. They were doing everything they could to get away. But the vast majority of the people in my platoon was like, we would have been devastated if we didn't get sent there, because this is like, we were getting trained for this. We were ready. We were gung ho, and you're really super motivated. And your head gets filled with, when we're young too, I mean, and so this is the opportunity for you to go and save the world, or I don't know, whatever. We were doing a good thing, and it was for your country and all that, and you should be proud of it. And you're men now and all this kind of stuff. So we're raring to go. And I remember when I did get a short leave before going home, it was like, people say, "Oh, aren't you worried about going?" I go, "Oh no, I've been devastated if I didn't get to go." Now, I mean, this is what this is the reason I'm in there. I mean, they were going to draft me, I mean, and technically I was drafted in a sense, because if they hadn't called me up, I wasn't going to volunteer. And they gave me the opportunity to do 2 years. Otherwise, it would have been like in the Army for 2 years, if I hadn't volunteered for the Marine Corps. And I just thought about making a career or anything of it. It was just this is something you got to do. And then answer your question?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And how did your mother and other people around you feel about you joining the Marine Corps?
I had two sisters, and they were both married and had kids and that, and they were like divorced from the family, far away, didn't have much contact with them. And it's not like nowadays everybody's like connected with everything, phones, TVs, you name it, the internet. So I didn't see him very often. And I had a brother that I didn't see, an older brother that lived in Detroit. But my mom was very worried. She was worried about the war, and people were telling. And she actually at that time worked for the American Legion as a barmaid. And so who knows what kind of stories she heard from them. I mean, and just, and she was not real excited about me going over there. But at the same time, she was a patriotic type person in the sense she believed, if you, the worst thing in the world, and I remember her talking about deserters or draft dodgers, how bad they were, and that, and betraying their country, and she didn't have a clue what was going on. But I mean, to her, if you were against the government and whatever, that was a bad thing, and that. So that would have been the gist of it in a sense.
And what year exactly were you sent to Vietnam?
1969.
1969.
First part of 69. And actually I was only, like I said, I was only in the service 69 and 70. So, and I wasn't even in the full 2 years because I got hurt and they let me out early because of that, And although to this day I regret that, because I had an opportunity right before I got out. I had done, I think, pretty good in the service. Anyway, they thought I did too, I guess. And they gave me an opportunity. They were going to give me 4 years of college if I would stay in. I'd have to re-up for 6 years, but they would pay for 4 years of college. And while I was at college, I'd be like in a reservist going to, weekend classes, meetings and stuff like that. And then I would go back in as an officer. And but this is when I came back from Vietnam, and I had things weren't exactly like everybody had said before, and things like, I had a lot of questions in mind. I wasn't like upset with the military, but it was like, things aren't like, there's a lot of questions in my mind that I need answered yet, and so I didn't jump. I'll tell you, to this day, if I could go back and do it over again, I would have stayed in the military. I would have done that and probably stayed and made a career of it and that, but, that's just the way it is. And then after I got out of the military, I ran into different veterans and we talked about stuff, but also things that had happened. I began questioning, and I had this immense desire to learn as much as I could about really what was going on, because I realized when I was older, I didn't know shit what the politics of what was going on, and the more things I found out and then compared them to what I knew in reality, is like, wait, something isn't right here. Things aren't falling together. And then I really sought out people that I thought, were, and probably most people say were anti-war, had different things. Like I knew some people that were in the Quakers, and I started talking to them. So I really got a different education, not a one-sided education, but all of a sudden my education was becoming more rounded as to the war, because I'd heard part of the government side over here, what that's going there, and you'd hear what the news media was saying, what I saw, and then different organizations, people, and I was putting it all together, and I was like, and at that age you're sort of like a sponge, you can't get enough stuff in you.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the chain of events while you were over there that started to change your perspective and bring up those questions?
Yeah, actually some of them probably funny, I think I was not a real bad kid growing up, but I wasn't a great kid, and some interesting things happened to me when we were at the selective service place down in Coral Gables, which is Miami, South Miami, and waiting to go off, and they come up, and because I had volunteered for the Marine Corps, and my friend that was with me, they volunteered him. Nobody else would raise their hand, and they said, so they I thought he actually started crying. He couldn't believe he was going, and it was like sort of funny. I go, oh, geez, and and he was like tall thing. He was bigger than me, like a foot taller, and just I was like, really, this is. But all of a sudden they put me in charge of like these 15 guys, and they said, you're going to be in charge. And it's like the first time anybody had given me responsibility like that. I liked it. And they said, I want you get everybody at the airport and on this airplane tomorrow morning, blah, blah, you're flying to North Carolina, or South Carolina, wherever it was. South Carolina, I'm sorry. And so that started the chain of event. And things were different from what I thought. Mm-hmm. And people that I saw that you would think, and I was skinny, and I was, not that I'm a big person now, but I gained like 40 pounds in boot camp. I grew, really a lot, but it was strength more, and I was growing. It was hard for me, but at the same time, it was like I wasn't going to give up and challenge. But I saw other people that like gave up, different things. It was interesting things I heard about boot camp, and now I relate a little bit, but I was abused when I was a little kid, from the standpoint of father beating you up and stuff. I mean, but I thought that was normal. I mean, if you said something bad, you were going to get the shit kicked out of you. I mean, nowadays I know you don't do that, but I mean, and I mean, kicked out. It wasn't like you got a spanking. I mean, you were kicked on the ground. You were till you could crawl away type of thing. And I just thought that's the way. So when they were brutal to us, in the Marine Corps, and they were to some extent, they'd line you out and punch you in the stomach and stuff. Yeah, it hurt, but it wasn't a big deal. I mean, and they said, you're going to war, you needed to toughen up. And I said, well, I thought I was a pretty tough kid, from the block, in a sense. And so, we are going out, and everybody's going to be killing everybody or trying to. So you'd better be. I took it very seriously. And but it was, you're processing things in your mind. All of a sudden, things are different from what you necessarily thought. And I don't ever remember the guy that I thought was my uncle, that was the Marine, really telling me that sort of stuff. It was like, and it just didn't jive. And I had seen, television, movies, like the Jack Webb one day. And so, you're trying to put all this together, and how much is really right and wrong. And but I was getting into it. I was getting brainwashed real good. And I can't, to this day, I can't say I was brainwashed, but I was receptive to that. And but then other things would happen. One of the things, we went to Infantry Training Regiment, which is in North Carolina, at Camp Lejeune. And while we were there, and we had a little bit of freedom, like they'd give you the afternoon off. It wasn't like boot camp, you did all this stuff, but like it was Saturday afternoon, so they said you could go to, and they had an enlisted men's club, you could go there. Well, we were going through this wooded area to go there, and these black guys like basically jumped us. And they were Marines, and they came out for it, and they started, and and next thing I know, he hit me, and so we actually they didn't do very good. They weren't very good fighters, but I was like, what's going on? And I grew up, and I mean, I knew what racism was, and I knew, in our place it was bad, but I never thought, because the whole time you're in boot camp, everybody's green, all this kind of stuff. All of a sudden I get to Camp Lejeune, and there's a lot of racial, and we're going, and I mean, guys are telling me, like, you be careful, we've had guys bayoneted here, knifed by the, and so I see there's all this racial tension going on, different things that were, something isn't right here. It isn't like everybody told me again. But you just go on and I understood, like if you had a thing, you had to fight. That was at least that. I mean, I know nowadays that's not right. I want to get it wrong, but you duked it out and whatever, and you hope you didn't want to kill somebody or get hurt, whatever. But at the same time, I wasn't going to let somebody abuse me and that. And but again, I tried to follow all the rules. I thought I'd be a good Marine. Even though I struggled at it sometimes, I wasn't the best. Like they have one guy's a platoon's like the star guy. He's like a football athlete. He does everything absolutely right. I wasn't that, but I was. And so anyway, the other thing I noticed, we had the guys drinking a lot. I mean, people were drinking, and I grew up. I mean, I had drank a little bit when I was probably 13, but probably even though my mother was an alcoholic and my stepfather was alcoholic, and there was a lot of alcoholism, and my brother turned out got alcohol and drugs both, and I probably drank 5 times. Got drunk 5 times, but all of them were because I went to a party and everybody was just drinking beer. You weren't going to the party. It wasn't to have a beer. It was everybody. We're all getting drunk. And you'd throw up and get sick. It was stupid. Well, when I got into the Marine Corps, I saw these people were doing weird and they're getting very violent over alcohol, and I guess I sort of related back to my family. The kind of horrible fights I remember them having over alcohol, when they'd be drunk and stuff. And that was why my stepfather was abusive, because he was a drunk. He'd come in and, people would say, oh, he was the nicest guy in the world when he wasn't drinking. But when he was drinking, he was a monster, And so I understood that. And during that training, I never drank again. I've never drank in my life since then. I mean, I have to take it back. At my wedding, I had a glass of champagne, probably 2 sips. But, I mean, I don't drink. And I got very good at like fooling people with sodas and stuff, pretending so that you'd fit in, because it made a lot of my friends uncomfortable, and so you learn that. But when I went to Vietnam, one of the things I noticed was there was like 3 different distinct people. There was me people, meaning you didn't drink or whatever, or there was the people that drank a lot. I mean, there wasn't 2 beers weren't enough. I mean, you'd just about be drunk, and a lot of those guys that I saw were staff enlisted men, had been in a long time. They're career staff enlisted men, and they had alcohol problems, and that was how they were coping with things. I mean, before we'd go out on certain operations, they were basically drunk. And then the other one was drugs. People were drugged. I didn't see as much drugs as I heard about. I mean, and more when I came back, people say, "Oh, so much," and I didn't see real hard drugs. But people were marijuana and stuff. What you would see is there was groups that would disappear, like, oh, we're behind over there, and what do they do? You just stay away from them, because then that. And so, but they weren't so high. You could see somebody with alcohol high or intoxicated recognized easier than you could somebody with drugs. So again, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that there wasn't people that really were really heavy into drugs, but I didn't personally experience nobody shooting up or anything that I saw. I think mainly like marijuana or hashish. I mean, you could smell it, so you knew that people were over there. They were all over. Stay out of that area. You weren't supposed to be over there. You could smell it. You knew somebody was doing something like that. But it was kept cool, and they didn't flaunt it in that. But the other thing I did notice in Vietnam, like I had a couple black guys in my squad, and we were very close, and we all got along and that. But we went into like a couple areas, like one time you'd move to and go into where there's a bigger, like a base operation like Da Nang or something, and there'd be a group of blacks there, and there was like, I thought the whites and the blacks were going to have a shootout together. I mean, there was a lot of, and they were like, the whites would be shooting birds at the blacks, and the blacks would be giving them, power sign, and they had all sorts of different, and I don't remember exactly what the different things, but they had, little types of, I'll call it decoration they do that meant black power, but they'd show them off, and the white guys would get upset and be screaming back and forth with each other, and you're thinking, and I mean, we all had weapons, loaded weapons, and a lot of stuff. I mean, you could easily kill somebody, and I guess it did happen on occasion, and luckily, I mean, I was never in the middle when somebody did do it, but I mean, there was a lot of tension there, and I remember when I was in Okinawa on the way over, we were going to be there for I think a week or something, waiting to go to Vietnam, and they said, well, you got to do some kind of duty. Some people got assigned mess duty and that. And they said, well, we're going to put you with the military police. And they said, oh, you're going to, there was like 10 of us. They took us out. And they said, okay, you'll report to the military police, the EMPs. And we asked them what we're going to do. And they said, well, you guys just ride in this little truck here with us, a van. And they gave us big billy clubs and a web belt to wear and a helmet. You know, I mean, it's just an Army helmet, but it said MP on it. And they said, if we go to someplace, well, you know, and they had wear the gun, regular uniform of MP, and they said, if there's any problems there, you support us. You know, you back us up. You're the muscle there, you know, type of thing. And I thought, oh, this sounds like a real easy job, right? And I didn't know it at the time, but I think it was Camp Hague, but it was in Okinawa, and they said you're going to be on 12 hours, off 12 hours. So you might be all day at the MP or all night, depending. So the first couple of days I was all day there, and we had a few things we'd go to and that, and but we found out what they were throwing us in, they'd go to, and there would be a lot of fights. I mean, 2 or 3 guys fighting, and we never did. We just sort of would stand there, and they'd break the guys would get out and break them up, and they'd arrest these guys or send them back to whatever they did with, you know, and so that was it. Well, then all of a sudden, I got to the night shift, and we were going out, and what they were doing was, they said it was blacks, but I think it was probably blacks and whites both. But in Okinawa, there's more like old Florida used to be. There was no air conditioning in the barracks and that, and the windows were open and that, and they had foot. So when we went in, the guys are going, "Wear your boots at night when you sleep in the cot, even if you take your clothes off." Okay, you know, like they tell you. And I said, "Why are you doing that?" And it's, you know, and they were saying, well, and sleep with your feet. Don't sleep with your head down by the window. Sleep with your feet there, with your boots by the window. Well, what was happening? Guys were coming by with razors and slashing people on the face or whatever, wherever they could slash them. So hopefully you get your boot. And it was racially motivated. And so one night they had one, and we caught these 2 black guys, and it was a bunch. I mean, and they were beating the hell out of them and that. And I mean, it was just like, not judging the race, but what I realized was, I mean, there was a major problem here. I mean, whether it was blacks, white, whatever. I mean, but this kind of stuff going on a military base, you know, and people with guns around and that. I mean, like, this was very, and so then, like, it was the last day I was on that detail. We ended up at the mess hall, and for lunch, at lunchtime, and they were having a riot. And I thought, you know, you see this stuff on TV and that, but, you know, when you pick up even these little chairs that are in mess halls, they're like a metal frame with the fiberglass or plastic-like seat. Right. But I mean, if you hit somebody in the head, you can hurt people with these things. I mean, and people are stabbing people with forks and stuff. We go in there, and I mean, there's hundreds of people, and it's a big mess hall. There was hundreds of people going to town, and they just said, go in there, and they told, and we were just basically, you know, big group of us with clubs, you know, trying to separate people again, and that's what we did. But after that, and it was, you know, basically the blacks and whites were fighting. And it was like, I said, holy mackerel. And I haven't even got to Vietnam yet, you know, this is like, and I said, well, and you know, you knew there was problems in the state. I mean, you hear stuff, but it's like, I said, God, I couldn't believe it was here. Because I thought, I was under the impression, and I still to this day believe, the Marine Corps was a lot more rigid and had a lot stricter discipline in that than the Army. And when I was in Vietnam one time, we had to go on a detail, and we went up to up north, and when we did, we ended up at an Army base overnight to stay at. And I looked at how, we were talking to the other Marines, you know, I said, God, can you believe these guys? They're so undisciplined and a mess, and the food I mean, it's just like, I'm glad I'm not in the Army, you know, we were saying it. I mean, it's unfair to do it, but we were comparing ourselves to them, you know, and I said, oh, geez, no wonder they're having such a problem, you know, we saw, and we were just looking at the phone. But again, you know, it's a snapshot you take of an area, but it was like exposure. And anyway, going back to what you were asking about, what sort of stuff changed me. And then, you know, when we were going through villages doing patrols and stuff, you'd see the kids, and I was like, oh, they're nice kids and all this kind of stuff and that. And but then, because one of my jobs was to either find or eliminate mines and booby traps, because I think like 80 or 85% of the casualties in Vietnam were from that. And that's why when I hear about Afghanistan with the IEDs and stuff like that, that's not unusual. I mean, or even in World War II, they had a lot. You know, the difference in World War II, they had big frontal assaults on beaches and that, so you didn't, you know, relate to the other stuff. But when you're just day-to-day operations, that mines and booby traps and things like that take a lot of casualties. So anyway, one of the things that I wanted to do a good job is that, you know, you learn to understand the people, because the people are there. They're going to help you know that those things are there. They don't want to get blown up and that, and if they know about them, they may let you know. So me being very naive, think that all these kids, you get to kids and you give them candy, you know, you get friendly with the people, and in the morning you see them, you go through the village and you think they're all real nice to you, and they're, and it's like, hey, hi, how are you? You're doing a good thing. We're here, they're protecting them and all that, right? Then you walk out a little bit down the road they were walking on, and all of a sudden you get blown up or whatever, and you realize after this happens a couple times that they're setting you up. The kids, they know about this because they go right there. They never get anything happen to them, but as soon as you guys get there, something happens. And so, we're supposedly helping, but at the same time, then, if you could imagine, like, if we went into areas like you'd say, and I couldn't speak, you learned about 20 words in Vietnamese or something, enough to, scream at people, or, probably a few cuss words, and, you knew whatever, just to get them to do things, or either stop or get out of the way or move or whatever you want them to do, lay down, put their hands up, whatever. And at the time, I didn't think about it. After you think about it, going to somebody's house and all of a sudden you tell them, get out of their house or this and that, and you're doing all these things. I mean, this is their homes. We're supposed to be protecting them. We're treating them probably as bad as we treat dogs. I mean, I would never treat my dog that bad. And but I mean, it wasn't outright abuse, but it's the type of thing that, what if somebody just kicks in your door and comes in well, there wasn't any doors to kick per se in a lot of these places, but if you just go in there and throw everybody out and tear through all their stuff, what little bit of stuff they have, and we were very callous, I guess, and very caring, and things just weren't the way that I thought, and they were so poor. I mean, even though I grew up a poor kid, I mean, I was rich compared to and I've been to a lot of the third world countries and stuff since then, what I mean? Like like now, there's places you can go to where people make, if they make $600 a year, they're happy, they're making a lot of money, and most Americans don't understand that. Even the poor Americans don't understand. And that was the other thing, a lot of the people that went to Vietnam, they weren't rich kids. I mean, most of the kids I knew were, we had several American Indians in our unit that were, had lived on the reservation. It was I learned a lot of stuff about people and that, and it was very good. And, it's not only that you're close because of the circumstances you're in, but also, you have a lot of downtime, a lot of sit and talking. So, you're talking to people, nothing else to do. There's no TV, no radio. I mean, it's sort of interesting now because I hear about all this. I've talked to some people who come back from like Afghanistan and all the stuff they have in that. And I said, television, you're watching movies, you're on the internet, you're playing, games and stuff like that. And I don't begrudge, I don't look at it, but it's different.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, you can call home? That's like amazing. I mean, those are things that you wouldn't even, I couldn't even imagine. And Vietnam was advanced compared to like Korea or World War II, and so, but because I didn't have any money, my mother did, that was another thing I did. I sent all my money home to my mom. Now, they wouldn't let me send my whole paycheck home. I had to keep like $20 a month for spending money. So I didn't have a lot I couldn't get myself in much trouble anyway, but because of it, I didn't take an R&R or anything like that, where a lot of guys saved money to go to Australia or Hawaii, and stuff. And a lot of them were married too, or they went to see their family. But so I stayed there, and but things like, at night we would do that I didn't take as bad. Like when you shoot pop-up flares, you know what we're talking about, pop-up. It's a phosphorus, not phosphorus, magnesium. It burns real bright and like lights up the sky. I mean, it really lights it up like daylight. Okay. And they're in a little cylinder like that, and you take them and you go like that, and they shoot hundreds of feet up in the air and go boof. Sort of like 4th of July. Uh-huh. But we'd be out, and you'd shoot those into people's houses, their village, because they're out of straw. They'd catch on fire, and it wasn't like, nobody at the time when that was happening was like, oh, you're torching somebody. If somebody did it here and burned down your house, after I got out, I was in the fire service. I got, I hate 4th of July now because of all the things that people are so, they don't even think about it though. And that's sort of like us. We didn't think about it, oh my God, you just burned down that person's home. Oh, we burned down a hooch, or they killed their buffalo. The most important thing in their life, so we shot it 40 times, and all those type of things start to change in that. And you talk to different people and about different operations, hear what's going on in that. And then we would get the Stars and Stripes. I don't know if you heard that. That's the military newspaper for all the services. And there was operations and things that went on. And then we'd get back from Stars and Stripes. I says, was that where we went? What we did? Because it doesn't sound like the same thing. I don't remember that. It sounds a lot different than, well, why are they doing it? It's like, well, I guess. But at first, when I was in my naive state, it was like, well, they're just bad reporters, lazy. They just didn't get it right. not knowing that they purposely were doing that. And and I'd say, well, maybe I'm wrong, maybe they weren't. But after I got out and I got in VVAW, I met people that worked for SARS and they told us, they had put a different slant on it, like the news media would on occasion. And I thought, well, like if you read it in the newspaper or saw it on TV, it was, it was gospel. And I found out it wasn't. And so, I don't know. That's basically it.
And you said that things weren't what you expected. What did you expect going into the Marines that the war would be like?
Well, first of all, I guess I thought it'd be more clear cut who the enemy was. I grew up on World War II movies. And it wasn't because there was some point where they had NBA, North Vietnamese and that. And I remember the first time I saw a North Vietnamese person, I was like shocked he was a prisoner of war they had. And because he was so big. He was bigger than me, and I thought they were little people, and that same thing I knew from people from World War II. Same thing, and they all Japanese were little, but there was the northern Japanese that were big people, and so that surprised me. The other thing was that it wasn't clear to me what our nobody really sat down and said to me. They'd say, "Oh well, we're going to protect the village, or we're going to do this," but it wasn't clear. Maybe somebody knew, but now after when I got in VVAW and things like that, I found out even the officers that I talked to, and it wasn't that clear to them what the operation. Oh, like they'd say, well, let's go do this or do that, but there's always a much bigger context to it. Like, why would we do that? And I was lucky though, because most of what I did was a simple job. We had this road that went from Da Nang down to An Hoa, which was a base in the southwest, and it went through there, and there was an area called Arizona. Well, those roads, they needed to keep them open. That was our job, to make sure that those roads, so that the military could get through, and keep that open. So it made it much easier than if you were like getting dropped into back to an area trying to hunt somebody down in that. And so things that besides every morning going down these roads, different roads, they were pretty long. It wasn't, and to keep them up, try and make sure that there wasn't mines and stuff and that in them, and that they could keep up, not only for our people, but for the public, because part of, that supplies and transportation, that kept things back to normal. And so the enemy's job was to disrupt things in that, I guess. And plus we had a bridge. I stayed a while at Liberty Bridge. We had these bridges. I related to like the bridge over River Kauai. You never seen that movie? Oh, you have to watch that movie. It's a classic from World War II. Oh yeah, it's a true story, so you have to watch that. But write it down. Bridge over River Kauai.
I should have a pen on me. Let me get. I have one in here.
Anyway.
Hold on just a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I think your microphone is creeping onto your badge.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
That might create some issues.
Okay.
I'm just going to move it over. Just
Mhm.
We should ask about.
Let me take the badge off.
No,
I don't know if there was a difference
We got it
between
in there now. We don't
Oh,
lose
okay.
something about
continuity.
like working in the
Okay,
south
great.
and north.
Yeah, let's do a clap here real quick. That helps me find. We'll edit that out.
Okay. So anyway, this Liberty Bridge, it was just a bridge out in the middle of nowhere, I guess, to some degree. And we had a camp there, and we would stay there to make sure that nobody blew up the bridge or took it out, so that keep that open. And actually, the North Vietnamese, the enemy, tried to overrun it one time, and I guess more than one time, but they really made a big concerted effort, but they never ran it over in that. So that was the big part of our job. And so things though that we would do is like put people down the road at night, and we'd hide in the bushes and stuff, or up on a hill and look down the road. So, and because it was an area that was considered enemy, even though they had villages and people were there, if anybody was walking down at night, it was an enemy, so you shoot them, shoot at them and that and stuff. And it wasn't like you went out there and said to somebody, "Hey, stop, let's see your ID, who are you," or something like that. If you weren't an American on that road, you got shot, or we tried to shoot you, type of thing, or whatever, and or call something in, maybe mortars in on you, whatever it would be to, your life expectancy wasn't good if it, but it wasn't like you thought that there was going to be all these big, all of a sudden this army's going to come and like try to overrun you type of stuff. That just, I mean, yes, that did happen, but that wasn't the day-to-day type thing in that. And the big thing was trying to stay at night and not fall asleep out there. So there was always that possibility someone could slit your throat. And so, and I because I started working young at 12, I drank a lot of coffee. So I learned that. So I drink a lot of coffee to this day because I was in the fire service and we drank coffee. Because you'd be up all night long. So people say, "How can you drink so much coffee?" Well, that's why I can drink a lot of coffee, even if it wasn't that hot, because you couldn't have a fire at night. But you'd make coffee and drink it to keep you awake and that. And you'd sleep a lot in the daytime because if you're up all night, you got to sleep sometimes. So you sleep in the sun, and that. But we also had equipment would come down there to keep the road like a bulldozer. And I remember one night I slept under the bulldozer with another guy. I mean, we'd crawl under where the tracks are, the big track, and we'd sleep under, or the tanks would be there and we'd sleep under the tank. Because at night they'd shoot mortars over at you or rockets and that. So, you had a less chance of getting hit with anything, getting hurt if you were, under a big tank or a big bulldozer. It was even if they hit it, it probably wasn't going to hurt you, and that. So, just interesting things, And I remember that, big thing. You'd be really tired, so you just we'd take a break in the middle of the afternoon. You just get over on the side of the road. I mean, we're talking about like a dirt road, really, and you just lay down the dirt road and go to sleep. Somebody come over and kick you and say, "Okay, it's time to get up and go." A couple people would keep an eye out, and stuff like that. So it was. But I seemed like I acclimated myself to it. It didn't really bother me that much. And, ate a lot of sea rats, mostly sea rations. That's the food in the cans back then, little. Actually, I liked a lot of them. And, people say, "Oh, horrible." But the only ones I didn't like the scrambled eggs in the can. That was like, there's nothing you can do to make. And actually, when we went to that Army place, I won't call it an Army base, but where the Army people were that one time, up in the mountains, they fixed green eggs, and those were even worse. And I was like, the powdered eggs. I don't know if you ever had them.
No.
They're not very appetizing. But just funny things you remember. But living in tents, and stuff like that.
And when you came back, was there any kind of transition with how people were reacting towards the war when you were leaving and when you were coming back, how you were received and stuff?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I had a fair amount of friends when I left, and there really wasn't anybody sending you off or any. I mean, I know you see in the movies people, but I never experienced or knew anybody experienced other than like people that had I had a friend that was Italian, had a big family, extended family. When he left, they made a big bunch of stuff in that, and he got killed over there. And so I became very close to his family when I came back. He was in the Army, he wasn't in the Marine Corps, but I remember he had lived down a block over from me. And but most of the people, but when I came back, by the time I actually got home where I was out to visit people and that, I got invited to some I had problems and I realized it was me. It was like they seemed very immature, the people. They didn't seem, one, that they knew, didn't have a clue what was going on in the world. Never mind Vietnam. It's like, there was I thought petty stuff and that. And the girls seemed almost silly in a way and that. But I mean, you hear your guy just, you want to go out with all the women, but at the same time they seemed, I don't know. And so I think vets have a tendency to seek them out. It was easier to, even though I didn't know a lot of vets. I had a couple friends that were vets, but I also a couple guys. Another guy that was in the Marine Corps, not exactly the same time, but lived down the street from me. He got killed too. So and I know I didn't feel comfortable with his parents when you go by, and I don't think they felt comfortable with me either. So you just sort of distance yourself from all that. And there was a definitely noticeable difference, though, in how you got along with people. And the other thing is, and I didn't know it so much, but people after would tell you that people were say, "Well, he was this and this." He was, it's like, and they probably didn't have a clue as to what exactly anything, but they were I don't know what they thought people were, or how it changed them, or what they did, or something like that. But I'm sure I wasn't near as bad as they thought I was, whatever. But anyway, I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
While you were in Vietnam, did you have the idea that you were quote unquote winning or making progress, or that things were getting better in the country?
No. Actually, the last, in 70, they'd started talking about pull out and that. And by then, you're there, so you're listening to everything and that. And No, actually, a lot of what we talked is that we did not. Marines don't want to lose. I mean, we didn't want to lose. You know, that's. And I mean, I wasn't the kind of like I know sports people that are really. I mean, they can't lose at all. My brother's very competitive. I was never that way. But I mean, as a group, we did not want to lose. And it's like the big complaints I hear is, well, they didn't let me fight. They wouldn't let us fight the war the way we should or the way we wanted to, and that. And you know, there's this big elusive enemy out there, and we needed to if they just let us really bar, you know, don't hold us back at all, just let us go, we'd take care of, you know, everything. And you know, I learned later that was a fallacy. I mean, when you look at how many bombs we dropped on Vietnam, I think we dropped more bombs on Vietnam than we did in all World War II. You know, I mean, this is a little country. You know, you're surprised the country's still there. And you know, I remember when we would be out on an operation or out, you know, and the jets would come over and the big plane with the bombs, you know, out, and I mean, they would scare the heck out of us. And they weren't that close. I mean, when you think about it, they were pretty far away. And I think, God, thank goodness they don't have all that sort of stuff. We used to talk about that. If, you know, this could be a lot worse, you know, and whatever. And but that was some selfish. I mean, we're looking at it from our own standpoint. And I was thinking, it's like, you'd wonder sometimes how anybody lived through any of that stuff. And yet, you know, I have to say the guys that I knew that were good Marines or good soldiers that were really about their job had a lot of respect for the enemy in the sense of, you know, I mean, these people live out in that jungle. I mean, we're sort of, I mean, not that we aren't tough, but we're pampered compared to those people, and they lived underground, you know, a lot of them and stuff. And I mean, we do horrible things, and they still keep coming back, you know, and that. So, I mean, you have to respect somebody for that. And I don't know if I wouldn't say you necessarily admire them, but you had to understand and, you know, and say, hey, you know. And we had Chuhois. I don't know if you heard them. That's where the enemy that would come over, give up. You know, they'd turn themselves in, and we would use them as scouts. And we had one with us that, so it was an enemy, but he was, and the guy was a real physical. I mean, you could tell he was a good soldier. And you know, he was on our side. At least, hopefully, now I've heard since, and you know, I mean, many years now, but that they were really like had come over, infiltrated us, and we were getting, you know, suckered in, which could be true. You know, I'm sure it did happen some, probably not, but you know, it gave you a different perspective on the people rather than just the things that you hear before. But you know, one thing that was very interesting when I was going through my training, I remember he was from New Mexico. He was an Indian, American Indian. I'm not sure. I think he might have been an Apache. I'm not sure what kind of. I might be wrong about what kind of, but he was an Indian. And I remember during our training, he brought stuff. Went home for the weekend and brought stuff to us. And hottest food I ever had. And this was Mexican. I mean, not Mexican. I mean, Indian food. And I said, I didn't know you guys ate food like that. It burned my insides out. We were all fighting over the water fountain. But what I was trying to get, he had already been to Vietnam, and this was his second tour. He was going over, training with us to go over. And we had this mock-up village they had, the Marine Corps had in California, that we had to go in and take, you know, over. And he says, I'm going to give you guys some inside information. As soon as we get in there, he says, you're going to gather the people together. He says, take all the elderly people. And they had, I guess they had Vietnamese people that were, the government paid to be simulate this. He says, take them over here. And he says, we'll kill them all right away. And like that was first, because he said, you know, if the people that are old, and I don't know what old means, you know, I'm old now, I'm probably, but if anybody's going to do anything against it, it's not afraid of, they don't have anything to live, they've already lived their life, and they've got young kids there, so they're concerned that if there's anybody that's going to be a danger to you, it's going to be the older people. And he said, you know, so you want to get, if you got to do something to get rid of them, you know, if you can't control them or can't just, and I was like, you know, we're learning this in training. This is like all of a sudden, you know, and then they, you know, start talking about, you know, what little kids are doing and stuff like that. And I'm like, you don't think of little kids like, although I do have a nephew now that is pretty bad. That he he might do some of that stuff. All joking aside. But, you know, I mean, and I know it was probably blown out of proportion. They said, you know, little kids bringing hand grenades up to people and stuff like that. But, I mean, I know it happened, but not as much as you think. But things weren't like you normally think they are. And I guess we fall into and probably 10 times worse now with TV and the movies and that. I can't imagine the veterans going over nowadays. And I haven't had as much interaction with them like Scott has. Now, I did work with some guys that went to Iraq and to Afghanistan. I talked to them and that. And I was surprised. I think they took things a lot harder than they would. But at the same time, I know I'm probably much harder. I mean, what should I say? You put up a wall or something to protect yourself in that so that things don't bother you as much. And I'm much better at that than a lot of people probably are. And anyway, did I answer your question? I got off on a tangent there. I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah.
it's great. You answered the question plus
Yeah.
a lot more.
Yeah.
Okay.
You mentioned something about how now the veterans, when they go, they have the movies and they have all this further access to media.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you think that's actually changing the way they experience the war as opposed to how you did.
Well, one thing is like the only communication I had with the people, my family, what little bit I had with them, you know, and was letters. My brother in the Navy would write me, and although he tried to come and, it was very funny. When I was at North Carolina for my final training before going to California to leave for Vietnam, he was in Norfolk, so he got a weekend leave to come and visit me at where I was at Camp Lejeune. Well, they gave me a weekend leave, and a man that used to work for me, his daughter was in the town there that day that I used to work at the gas station for on the weekends. And so they called and said, "Will you come over and have dinner with us?" So I went there Saturday, and my brother came to Camp Lejeune. I never got to see him. He took a bus and everything to go to Camp Lejeune to visit me before I went overseas, and I missed him. So it was sort of a funny thing. But please ask your question again. I must be
It's
late.
okay.
Yeah.
Just you were mentioning that now they have a lot more access to
Oh,
media.
right.
and all that.
Okay, so yeah, and that's where I got into the letters and having, and so I would get a couple letters, and I think some friends of my mom's family sent me a food kit, but that was the extent of my communications with that there. And I remember one time we had a Jeep and we had radios, you know, really powerful radio, and we tried to hook into the phone system back, and we couldn't do it. And so, but that was like the closest we came to anything. Guys I talk to now, he had his family send him a laptop at home so he could be on Skype with them, you know, when he was in Afghanistan. And he was like, and it was quite often. I mean, it was like every couple days or something. He was, you know, actually talking to his family on Skype. And I was like, wow, that's sort of neat. And he said, they said, that, you know, they were sending videotapes and video games to him to use there. And I just like, it just was so different, you know. And I remember like now in the pictures, people send video cameras now. I had like a little, like a brownie camera. You know, people say, "Wow, you didn't have a whole lot of pictures from Vietnam." I didn't have a little. I had a little snapshot, 126. I don't know if you've ever seen those 126 cameras, little cartridge. That was the camera I had. You know, then I don't know, just the things that they have now in the accent. And I don't begrudge you. I think it's nice, but I think it's like when I left to Vietnam, all my time, I didn't know if I was going to come back or not. I mean, I wasn't fatalistic, but, you know, I had accepted the fact that, you know, everybody says, you know, and I remember the unit I went to, they said, oh, really high casualty rate, and all this kind of, you know, they scared the hell out of it, but it did have a high casualty rate. I mean, not everybody killed, but dead or, wounded, you know, a lot of people, the majority of people got either wounded or killed. So, you know, you sort of accept it. You knew that, you know, you weren't going to say, well, this isn't going to happen to me. It probably is going to happen. Better that way. And I think that you handle things better than that. I mean, you get scared, but it doesn't. Everybody gets scared of everything, but you don't want it to overwhelm you to where you can't function and control what you need to do. I mean, you know, if a person gets so scared they can't move, and then they need to get in cover, that's a problem. You know, or if they can't shoot somebody because they need to shoot them, that's a problem. But just being scared is not a problem in itself. And you know, so I don't know, and nobody can look inside of people's brains, so you know how much level or difference of that. And I think people, I've had things where they'll startle and you take back from it, and you physically have to stop and think about it and say, oh shit, I got to do something, you know. But you know, just being scared or startled here isn't going to get it. You know, you got to do something. And so I think now there's a difference where I had just sort of separated myself from the world. And that was the big thing we used to say, oh, we're going back to the world. I think that people now really don't separate themselves from the world. And I don't think they try to. Mm-hmm. And I think that can have some negative, that's my only personal opinion. I'm sure some psychologist or something say I'm nuts, you know, that doesn't apply at all, you know, you're wrong and that. But I think that they do need to separate look at it that they're in a different kind of world and separate. And I don't think they really do. I think they try to hold those ties rather than cutting it and thing like that. And I think that causes some problems with them. But it could be wrong because I don't know the real data. But every war, the number of casualties change. I mean, it's terrible having casualties. But when you talk about the casualty numbers now versus previous wars, they're very low. I mean, if you're the guy loses your legs, I mean, that's not a nice thing. But when you're starting to look at the percentages and the numbers overall, that has a different aspect. Yet, we're saying we're having much more psychological, or at least they perceive now. Is that just because they're diagnosing it better? I'm inclined to not think it is. I'm thinking like after World War II, and I've known some vets pretty good from World War II that I worked with, older men that were at the Battle of the Bulge and were at Iwo Jima and places like that. And they came back and they knew they were at a war. There was a separate, and they left it. They, in their mind, they said, you have to leave it. I mean, otherwise you're going to have problems. And you may have nightmare or dream about something. I mean, everybody has that kind of stuff once in a while. It's just when it starts being a overwhelming thing, I think, in your life that it makes a difference. I don't think anybody can say that, even if they've never been to anything before, say they haven't had a nightmare. I mean, that's just part of life. But when it gets to where it's affecting you in your wake-up time, that's a problem. And I know, like, 2 veterans I knew really well, and one was a Marine, one was the Army. One thing is, they just actually, they had some really bad experience. One of them had lost his leg at the Battle of the Bulge, and but they had divorced themselves. They were in America now. This is different. I came back to this great country. Got a job, work, what else, and they were trying to do the best for themselves. I've talked to some of the veterans, and they're not looking at it the same way. That's the impression I get. I mean, but a few I've talked to doesn't. I mean, I can't extrapolate that out to everybody else. That would be totally unfair. But and sometimes, actually, lately I've thought about it. I haven't said anything to anybody, but I've sort of felt guilty. Maybe I should be going and volunteering to try and I don't know if I could be any help. I may be more harm than help. But like I know, after the Vietnam War, it helped to have counseling sessions and groups and that. And I know VVAW was involved in some of that to, talk about the things and put them in. I don't think, when there's 2 things, but a lot of things it's cathartic when you talk them out, but I think also having other people to put it in perspective. Say, oh yeah, these things happen to a lot of people, and that it's not the end of the world or whatever. And I think Alcoholics and Narcotics Anonymous, and I mean, I've never been to one, but I think they do similar types of things by their talking out and explaining who they are and what they're doing, that other people recognize they're not alone, other things happen, but now you have to put it in the proper, if you want to go on in a normal life. I mean, you may want to stay that way.
From what you say, it seems like you were able to really separate yourself once, you came back. Do you feel that your experience in and correct me if I'm wrong, but do you feel that your experience in Vietnam changed you in any ways?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But I mean, every experience changes you. No matter what it is. If you get beat up, it changes you. If you go to a really nice party and have a great time, it has an influence on. So I think even though there was bad things about Vietnam, I think it had a lot of positive things for me changing in my life. And that, if nothing else, is to look differently at certain things and have a different perspective of how I'm looking at it and to appreciate life more. And I'll tell you one of the things that I've told many people after I came back in my family, and that is that I learned about people. And one of the things I learned about people is anybody's capable of anything. And that there are some people that are just great people, and there are other people that are just, I mean, I wouldn't have a problem killing them in a minute. I think there's, and, my wife gets all upset about it. I see these people that do these horrible crimes out there to kids and stuff, and I said, why are we even having a trial and putting them in prison? It's like the guy that killed all those people at Fort Hood. Now he's got, he's going to get the death penalty, but prior to, they want to put him in life. Why would you want to put somebody like that? And he he wasn't, I understand, I believe in our justice system. If there's any shadow of doubt, and that's why a lot of people they've been on death row, they find out later they're innocent. That's why I don't believe it. But, there's cases where they have people on film blowing people's brains out for the fun of it. Why should we pay to take care of them the rest of it? I mean, it's like a rabid dog. If you have a dog that has rabies and it's attacking everybody, and I love animals. I hate to say it, there's some animals I probably like better than some people. But, I wouldn't hesitate to kill that dog because it's a threat to everybody else. And I believe there are people like that in the world. I mean, that are just evil or whatever you want to label them in that. And I guess that I feel like I have a better sometimes that I can, when I meet people and I have some kind of experience, I have a better, for me, comfortable feeling, grasping and making a decision as to what kind of people they are, if I like them or not. That could be really wrong thing, invalid, but I don't think it is.
And can you tell us a little bit now about how you got involved in activism and anti-war activism?
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned, when I came back, I tried to learn a lot about it, and I realized that things weren't, but I knew I needed to get an education, and I wanted to have a better life, than what my mom, she was always struggling, and we didn't have a lot of stuff, and I didn't want to be that way, and I thought, after getting, at least I had some opportunity but I needed to get an education, and I knew that education was a key to it. At least I believe that. So, and I had the GI Bill and stuff, and people looked at you a little bit different as a vet, as to help you and stuff. So I started the community college, and I was struggling a little bit there just because, but I began, and I think I was smart enough to got in groups, ask a lot of people, but at the same time that I was doing that to help me to get, my English and things like to get better at it, it enabled me to also to talk about, because people say, oh, you're a vet, they ask you stuff, and you start talking, and I didn't really like to talk about, like you notice, we didn't go into a lot of detail about the war. I don't believe in I don't want to tell war stories for the sake of telling war stories. But I realized there was things that people needed and wanted to know, and that I knew, but I also wanted to know things from them in that. And as a result that I started meeting more people were activist related, like whether they were Quakers, and that's how I met some of the Quakers. I met a nun that out of Miami that she was going to school. I don't remember exactly how, some class or something, and she was an activist. And so I learned about the Berrigans and that, and I was raised Catholic, so that had some meaning to me there, and I was like, wow. And I wanted to learn more, not only from reading and that, but then what vets groups run. And I started actually the first group I heard about was SDS, Students for Democratic Society. And I went to a meeting they had down there. And there was a veteran at it. And so he said, well, about this other group. And so I heard stuff about BVI, but I really didn't know who they were. But we started on my own, we were going to do a few things. So we did some demonstrations against the war down in our area. And I was sort of like, it's like anything else. When you get a group of guys together, 10% of the people do it. So it'd be like myself and one other guy really get everything together, and then we'd have 20 other vets show up. Well, just because of circumstances, we got on the news media and that, and next thing you know, Scott, we ended up, and you hear different people, and it just sort of evolved in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Just to backtrack a little bit, when you got back here, where did you situate yourself? You said that you went to community college. Where did you do that? Just tell us a little bit more about.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, when I came back, I actually ended up in Jacksonville Naval Hospital. I stayed there for a while because I had my right shoulder was crushed, and so after they kept me there, and I rehabbed pretty. I really have a lot good to say about the hospital care. You hear horror stories, and I know there are bad things that went on, but my personal experience was very good. Ended up in Camp Lejeune, but just long enough to decide either I was going to stay in the service or get out, and I decided I was going to get out. So then I took a bus home from there, and the only place I really had to go was back home where my mom was and that. And I remember I got in like 12 o'clock at night in Hollywood, and we lived in a place called Lake Forest, which is like a suburb of Hollywood. And I walked from there in the middle of the night over home in my uniform. I came home in uniform because you get cheaper rate, at that time. I think they still do that if you fly and different things like that. So I didn't have much money even then because like I said, I'd sent it all home and that. And so I came home and I knew I needed to work and I knew I needed to, so I went back to the gas station, had a couple other jobs, construction jobs and that, and I got into school. And so I worked, and I went, I think 2 or 3 days a week to school, and then I'd work all the other time and that. And that was basically the way things were. And then as I got more involved in demonstrations, though, a bad thing. I was working for a marine construction company, and one of the things I did along with going to the community college was I thought I always wanted to be like diving in it, and I found out there was a commercial diving course, and I found out that the government would pay for most of it because I was a veteran. So I took the I applied and I got in. I took the course, and I think it was like 3 months long or something like that, and I got certified. And so I got a job with a marine construction company, and that was like awesome. Wow, big pay. I mean, now you mean, but compared to everything, now it's like, wow, this is really, this could be really something. And but as I was involved in, when the union, there was a pile drivers union, and I can't remember the other one. When they found out I was involved in the anti-war activity, that was it. They didn't fire me. They just didn't have any more work for me anymore. And so, and I found that happening. That all of a sudden, even though I didn't behave like, I'll use the word hippie, the hippie or hippie vet, that I wasn't like that, but still I got labeled, and I mean it was, they didn't want, and most of the people were in unions and that, and I don't have anything against unions, and I mean, but they were very rigid in the sense that, the government's, even though the unions fight with the government, you don't go against the government type of thing. That's, I don't know if that makes sense. And that's sort of the way, they were the old school type thing, and so, I don't know if that answered your question.
It does.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about the motivations behind joining these groups and getting more involved with the VVAW?
Sure. Well, VVAW, as I got to talk to people and I read about it and understood and met more people in it, I realized that, number one, that it was easy to relate. They were all vets, and I was a Vietnam vet, and the things they were saying I knew to be factual pretty much, and I agreed with what they were saying. And VVAW, as an organization, was a nonprofit educational organization. It wasn't, I didn't look at it that I was an anti-war demonstrator per se. We were educating the public to the truly what was happening in Vietnam in the name of America. What soldiers were doing or not doing, and what the policies were over there versus what they were saying here. We just wanted to bring the truth out, and we tried to do that as much as we could and have factual verifications of it. Well, it just seemed like common sense at the time, but now I realize that was a big threat to Nixon or his administration people, and it never dawned on me that it was as big an impact as it ended up being, in that. And so that was sort of, and I remember that at a point in the trial, we felt like the Sunshine Patriots, that, and somebody had asked me, well, aren't you, afraid of going to prison? No, I mean, anybody said they want to go to prison's got an issue, I think, and I didn't want to go to prison. It's just like, who would want to get killed? I'm not suicidal. But at the same time, the Marine Corps instilled in myself, I belief is that you have to have beliefs and things, and I guess called an idealist in right and justice and that, we got sent to Vietnam to fight a war that wasn't just in that, but we believed it. And I mean, people were dying for it. Soldiers, and the people that were dying, they weren't getting them saying, oh, well, I'm not supposed to here to shoot me and kill me. No, they thought they were doing what they were really, and most of the time, a lot of people that probably got killed was either just because of, circumstance. I mean, it's like, I remember like we were in a foxhole one night and you hear bullets whistling, they make a noise when they come by your head, and you go, what dictates that you're going to get it between the eyes? I mean, like all these things can fly by, but only maybe one person gets hit right between the eyes, and and afterward everybody goes, oh, what's his name's dead over there, I don't know what determines it. It's like when I was in fire rescue. What determines that the thing will fall out of the sky and fall on somebody, off a crane or something and kill them? It was their time. I almost believe that that's true. I mean, I think you can speed it up. Let's say when all those bullets are flying, if you stand up there and wave, you're going to get, you're probably going to end up shortening your time. But I think sometimes, and whether you believe in God or don't, but some things just happen. It's like you're sitting on a bench on the side of the road, and all of a sudden the car goes out of control and runs over you and kills you. What control did you have over that? None, probably. Unless you were super Spider-Man, you could jump and get out of the way or something, or Superman. But those things happen. So looking at that in the veterans, I felt that we'd given so much already and done. This was really important, and it could mean a lot of more veterans wouldn't be killed. And it wasn't self-serving, but it was like, I wasn't going to be give up on that. And you know, basically what that meant was, and I had the FBI come to me, like I'm sure most of the guys did, and come and say to us, you know, they give you a line of shit, and this is after a period of time, but during this one time they contacted me, and they want you to turn against your friends and to protect yourself is basically what they're doing. And I wouldn't have done that. If they had me strung up, I wouldn't have done that. You know, I'm a firm believer that if you have to sacrifice, sometimes you do. You know, nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to suffer, or you know, whatever kind of suffering it is. But sometimes it's just the way it is.
Just to help contextualize things, like how did you feel about like Daniel Ellsberg release of the Pentagon Papers, and how did that like help like change your views of
you know, when I first hear about somebody like that, I wonder their motivation in that, and until I can either understand them, and usually don't get to meet people, but you know, you read something in the paper, I think and I think he turned out to be what I call a genuine guy. He really did it for the right motivations. It's like the guy now, and I don't remember his name, the one that just released all the NSA.
Snowden?
Yes.
Snowden?
Yeah. I'm not so sure his motivations are the right thing. I mean, I'm still undecided on that. He could be a real, almost traitor to the country, or he could be a hero. I don't know. He hasn't given me the indications yet that he's what I'd consider a hero, someone that really did it for the right reasons, and I'm not so sure he did it. I think now, after a long time, Ellsberg, yeah, I think he did do it for the right reasons, and I think he is. Those people should be here. You know, most people won't when the going gets or when the tough get going gets tough, the tough going. Yeah, most people aren't like that, in my experience. And I'm talking about real tough. I mean, a lot of people think a little tough, you know, but I mean when it means that you're either going to suffer a lot of pain, or that you know, you're going to be deprived of your livelihood or whatever, or finances. You know, one of the things that, you know, I mean, I was wanting to be, and I think most young people want to be better, to have a better life, and do things, and not be a bad person. I mean, there's obviously people that don't care, they want to be bad, you know, but but when all this happened, I mean, the things that I thought were going to be financial opportunities to work in that, I lost all them. I mean, you know, I basically didn't have a pot to piss in, you know, and my family didn't have any money, and you know, so you try to work harder at it, but doing these kind of things can take all that away from you, you know, and I have overcome that, you know, but a lot of people don't want to do that, or were not willing to do that, and especially if they go into it with their eyes open, and I did have my eyes open. I knew what was happening. I mean, I wasn't happy about some of the stuff, but it's just the way it is sometimes. You know, and I saw a new thing. I used to have a lot of I watched the show The FBI growing up, and I thought, oh wow, those guys are great. And then I remember when I was at my bond hearing, one of them got up on the stand, and I didn't know who the hell he was talking about, because he was saying all this stuff about supposedly me, and it was a total fabrication and a lie. And I'm like, wow, that's like amazing. I mean, that really, FBI agents do that? I mean, he was a real FBI agent and he was saying all that? I mean, like, where does that happen? And since then, in my career working, I've known some FBI, and you know, had a couple of their friends, and you know, they were nice people, and one was a neighbor that I ended up knowing. You know, that was he seemed like just like anybody else in that. But then I saw, you know, and I think it's like in law enforcement. I was, you know, working close with them in fire rescue for a long time, and you know, different things, and I did training with SWAT people and stuff like that. So I knew a lot of them, and you know, some of them are nice, but there's, you know, every kind of industry or occupation, there's people that are, you know, not very nice people, and you know, obviously the FBI and the government has the same thing, and there's politicians, and I guess, you know, it's people like Richard Nixon happens to get to be president, and it's really scary. And you know, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to. I think Obama is a good example of something that I think so many people were they wanted to have something, a difference in there, and they felt that by having a black man in there, and I've talked to white people, and I don't think but I think even blacks that they really didn't look 100% at this guy, other than his skin color. And that was, you know, I mean, there was things, yeah, he was a lawyer and all, but they really wanted him in for that. And, you know, that shouldn't be the best reason. You know, it's like when I was in the Marine Corps, everybody was green. That meant, you know, we were all the same. Now, what kind of green person you were going to be is what made the difference. Whether you were going to be a real hard worker, be real honest, and be trustworthy and loyal, that's important. You know, I think a lot of people are looking at Obama now and saying he's not the guy we thought he was in there and that, you know. And Richard Nixon was a guy that was apparently very smart, but what they didn't look at was the guy was very dishonest and very slimy. You know, I mean, I can't think of the right word to call. And you know, I was very upset when he died, and they had a full presidential, funeral procession on the horse-drawn casket and all. That was to me, it insulted every other decent president that's done the best they can. And you know, Jimmy Carter is not recognized as a very good president, but I'm sure at least he was honest and he tried to do his best. And you know, and I don't know if I had voted for him or not, I don't remember. But you know, one thing, if somebody tries and they're honest and stuff, I give them a lot of credit. But you know, Richard Nixon was, I mean, he almost brought down this country as far as I'm concerned. And anyway, enough of that.
To backtrack a little bit, when did
Yes.
you start getting to know the other like would-be defendants and the Gainesville Eight?
Yeah, I guess about 6 months after I was involved in that thing, and I ended up talking to Scott, and then it turned out that he lived in Hialeah, so he was going to come down this way. And then I met Alton Foss and a guy named Jim Hale that was out of Homestead. I was trying to expand out from the people in Broward. And you know, even though VVAW was a national organization, we were very small, handfuls of people here and there. So, you know, if I had 20 vets in Broward, Scott was like, wow, that's great. You got 20 guys and you're in the newspaper and all that. That's like great, you know. So we sort of tied, and so we then started going to meetings, and he said, well, we're going to make you a regional coordinator in that area because, you know, and Alton Foss was one, but, you know, nothing against Alton, but I mean, I didn't realize Alton had a lot of problems, lots of issues. I mean, he wasn't handling his problems right. Besides the fact that he ended up with a drug problem, I mean, he just emotionally wasn't handling his personal, a lot of issues. And so even though he was involved with some of that stuff, he was probably involved for the wrong reasons and that. So I tried to, you know, work with him, and it became, you know, like almost like a social thing in the sense that you had all these connections and different things with people, and it was important, you know, not only important as a large issue, but it was important as personal issue as vets and that, and you were supporting each other in that, and so it just evolved along that way. And the more we did different things and had meetings, and then as we interconnected in the sense of had more communications, that we found a lot more things, and that's where we were very susceptible to the government because they brought in their little people like I don't know if you remember Eugenio Martinez and different people. They were in the Watergate. They were out of Hialeah, you know, some of these people, and you know, we'd meet with Alton, and Scott lived there, and then so I'd go down there and that, and it was just like, and we were trying to do that, but these people were, you know, by recognizing, and you know, I was probably a great example. I grew up in what I call a fighter type environment. You know, you had to fight for yourself. You had to do this and that. And you didn't want to bully, because if you did, you were just going to get bullied more. So these guys would come in and tell us about how the government stuff is this, and you got to take it. And we know as Marines, you'll stand up, you know, and feed right into your ego. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're right, we would. We're not going to let that shit go on. If they say we can't protest, we're going to protest. If they're going to do this, we're going to stop that. And so, you know, a progressive over the period of time, we didn't know it, but that was helping right along into what they were trying to do. Make us look like bad guys, you know, and get us into, but you know, at the same time, I truly believe that they were capable of some of the stuff they were telling us they were going to do. There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, they had weapons and stuff. We saw them at points, you know, and that, and I have no doubt that some of those people were capable of killing somebody. I mean, you know, anybody, and I like I told you, anybody's capable of anything. You know, anybody's capable of murder. You'd probably say, well, my mother couldn't do that. Oh, yes, she could. If somebody was standing over you, torturing you, and saying they're going to continue to make it, and somebody gave your mother a gun and said, you can stop it by shooting them, I bet you they'd shoot them. That's what war can do. Those are the kind of situation you put it in, you know. But in civilized, luckily, you know, we live in a very civilized country, believe it or not. Even though we have a lot of crime in here, compared to other countries and places, it's pretty civilized. It doesn't happen, so it's absolutely shocking. And I know nowadays the news media tries to sensational all that, the more
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff, something individual one happens. And I think that's happened forever. I mean, I don't think any of this stuff's new. I think it happened in the 1500s, whatever, but you just didn't hear about it every night on TV.
And so, prior to the arrest, did you have any preconceived notions of the people who were infiltrators and provocateurs, that they were that?
Well, one, the William Lemur guy, because we went up to Gainesville and we were starting to hear a lot of stuff. And we knew that they were infiltrated because people had told us different stuff, but we didn't really know who they were. And I guess paranoid would be right. But paranoid, paranoid is bad when there's not something to be afraid of. But now, in that time, it turned out there was something to be afraid of. And, I had a hard time trusting people, I remember we'd be questioning each other, Scott, like, can we trust that person? Like, we need to check up on them some more. And if anything seemed just even a little bit out of ordinary, right away it was on, you were very suspicious of that person. That I remember there was somebody's girlfriend that, and I had asked her something and it wasn't exactly what I knew before. It turned out she was nobody, but well, I remember and I had confronted her about it, and she was really upset, that I could think that she might be a government or a police officer or something undercover. And people say, well, why are you worried about a police officer undercover if you're not doing anything? Well, I can tell you, right, that, I didn't have much money. I had a 62 Ford Fairlane, and it was a piece of junk. And I drive. You wouldn't believe, and I mean, I was a very law-abiding citizen. I would get pulled over, taken out of the car, laid down on the road, like you see in the movies, check. How often do you see that in our country? Not very often, right? Except maybe in LA, right? And then they'd say, oh, we made a mistake. I mean, at the time, I didn't know. Now I know because I know law enforcement, that I know a lot how they work. That was all bull. Somebody was telling them to do that. Yeah. And it wasn't the police officer individually, but the FBI or these other people high up in the government send down information to them and say, listen, we want you to pull that car over, do this kind of, and they do it. Because that's, they follow orders. And that's sort of what happens in Vietnam. You soldiers say, go do this, do that. And depending on if the circumstances get out of control, like which happened to Black Panthers and stuff, they got killed, And I'm not 100% supportive of Black Panthers in that, but I also understood some of the issues. That I got to understand people better, and I tried to understand. And, and I know some law enforcement people over the year that are very, not the best example of what law enforcement should be, to put it right. And that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did, and answered it well. So, in line with all of this stuff and already having these disillusionments with these government agencies and the police, what was your reaction at the National Convention when you guys got arrested? Was it surprise? No.
I mean, I was surprised in one way. Well, what happened was got sent to Pensacola for the grand jury hearing, and then all I asked is, are you who you are and your address? And that was basically it, and then leave. And then they said it was dismissed, you could go home. Well, I was the only one that got my car, went by myself all the way back home. Well, I wasn't going next to my house. I was going to the convention to meet all the vets and that. And by doing that, the police were at my house waiting for me. And they had picked up Scott and other people at their place where they thought they normally, and I'd sort of like inadvertently threw them off. And I got down there to the convention, and in the morning, it was like we left at night the next morning, because it's an 8-hour drive or something from, up in Pensacola. It was a long drive, I remember. So the next morning I'm there, like 9 o'clock or whatever it was in the morning, and they go, wow, everybody's looking, everybody's telling me. I said, what are you talking about? They said, well, didn't you know the indictments come down? Because I guess it was in the newspaper first, how they do that. And I go, oh, shit, I guess I'm in trouble. So I didn't really know what to do, except I said, well, I need to get out of there. And then I remember a teacher I'd had, Mr. Mijares, worked for the ACLU. And I said, well, I've got his phone number. I'm going to call him. And he said, well, we can't help you again, but I'll get he says, where can I get you at? And I gave him a phone number, a payphone number where he could contact. And they said, stay there until we can get. So a couple hours later, this guy calls me, a lawyer, and he gives me all this direction what to do and what not to do so I don't get in any more trouble than I'm probably already in and that. Which it turned out is Judge Leonard Fleet now. But what I didn't know, he was the lawyer representing the Black Afro militant, the BAMs. I don't know if you remember that movement. They were accused of firebombing a church or something in Miami, and they were militants, but they were all black. And so he was representing them. Well, he agreed to represent me and told me. So he met me a couple days later. I went into hiding, and But what was interesting is it turned out he was just doing it for publicity. He didn't do anything that he should have done, and I ended up sort of firing him because I had to fire him. I had to retain him, all I had was $1. That's what I gave him. That was his retainer he wanted. He said $1, and we had this big news conference, and that was the big what he wanted. But I ended up actually starting to file a suit against him because what he didn't do, and it was sort of the interesting thing I want to tell you about it is because my wife, it's her brother-in-law, and we didn't know it at the time. Years later, after I got married, she says, we go to this, and he shows up there, and I told her, I want you to know it. That. She says, oh, that's my brother-in-law, Judge Fleet. And I said, well, and he never said a word about it. And to this day, he's never said a word. And I've seen him a bunch of times socially, and he's never said one word. I think he's sort of embarrassed about it, to be honest with you. I hope that answered your question.
It did.
And like in this period of like knowing that the indictment had come down and like just like waiting, what did you end up doing? How did you go about it?
I tried to read. There wasn't a whole lot to do. I was in what I call hiding, and I didn't really have a little bit of money is all I had, and so I was told to go to the federal courthouse, which I did, and turn myself in, and when I did that, was an interesting thing happened because after that was for the bond hearing, and they told me I was going to be released right away, which was. That's the thing that Fleet did. That he hadn't done anything. He wasn't going to. He just wanted to get the news media. They're all there. Anyway, and this FBI agent gets up there, and unbelievable story. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? He said, and so I wanted to say, and he says, keep your mouth shut. You can't say a word. And so I just sat there and listened to this, and then they put you in the chains and take you to jail, And when they put me in the jail, an interesting thing happened, and this guy was already in the cell, and they threw me in the cell with there. And it was a white guy. And I didn't, but I didn't say much. And I was, like I said, I was already paranoid because I heard so many stories. So this guy's trying to really buddy up to be a good, he says, and he's telling me all about the jail and all this. And I think, well, it came time to eat lunch. So we went to the little place where they feed you, and it was like, I think, peanut butter and jelly. It wasn't much of a lunch. And but when it was there, the black Afro militants that were on trial were there too. And they see me there, and they said, hey, are you blah, blah, blah? And I said, yeah, and they said, hey, man, yeah. And then all of a sudden they say to me, be careful. Okay, and generally he says, well, that guy's a cop that they had in the cell with me.
Oh, wow.
And so that a couple hours later, he went back to the cell with me, and I didn't say anything. A couple hours later, they come and they took him out of the cell, and I never saw him again. And so my level of paranoia or trust was like, so I wasn't with anybody, and I didn't want to do, so then they transferred me up to Tallahassee, to the jail up there, and I guess they wanted to keep me out of communication with my lawyers. They say no, but we stopped at every jail on the way up there for overnight. Or I don't know. It seemed like it took forever and that, and sort of interesting. I was when U.S. Marshals took me in the back of a car, and they chained me all up and. It's just an interesting trip that I remember taking back there. Nothing, I don't necessarily want to experience it again, but it was just very interesting listening to their perspective in that. And they just thought terrible things of me. But over the trial, by the time the end of the trial was over, some of the U.S. Marshals were a pretty nice guys. They didn't know any more than we did. They were doing their job. That's all, and I don't begrudge anybody doing that, and I'm sure it can be a tough job to do it sometime and that. So, but they just thought I was like the worst person in the world, I don't know what they told them about me.
And besides the paranoia, what was going through your head? What were you experiencing at the time?
Well, I thought, I thought I was going to be in jail for a long time, and I thought, what I needed to do to, to I don't want to say survive, but not to, but. What was surprising when I went into the jail, I thought, maybe I had, because you hear so many stories about stuff. I was, a lot of guys, they were like very positive supporting me, and a lot of the blacks and that, because they found out, they knew, the jails like, the grapevine in jails are like unbelievable. It goes on, they know everything's going on. And so that helped, I think. That helped me that, and I didn't look at them, they were bad prisoners, and they were just, and they were supporting, say, good for you, keep it up, whatever. So I don't know, it just seemed, The guards were not real good, you know, and different. But what was interesting, after all this, you know, later on when I had a job on the fire department, and I've had a lot of different roles, well, one of the things that I did is I taught paramedic and EMT. Some of my students one time were prison guards from trying to remember the name of, but it's one of the worst prisons. It's one of the, not Rayford, but one of the other maximum security prisons in Florida. And they were in the special extrication unit, I think they called them, or something. When a prisoner like won't come out of their cell and stuff, they go in and get them out and that. But they are all trained to be, after they brutalize this person, I guess, then they doctor them up, you know, and try to help them, keep them from dying. But talking to him, and the guy that was the head of it, that was, I got to know him over the class. The class lasted, I guess, a couple months, you know, a college class. And he was really a nice guy. It was very interesting to hear their perspective on this stuff. And I mean, you know, the bottom line is, I mean, you're talking about some of these people in prison are really bad people. Not everybody, but I mean, there are some bad people in there. And, you know, they struggle with how they have to deal with it and not getting dehumanized themselves. And you know, like, I think they were the higher caliber, I guess, prison guard. Maybe that was the impression I get. But, you know, in dealing with the drug issue, because, you know, a lot of prisoners get drugs through guards. I mean, they have to. I mean, there's no other way. And Belgrade, that was the name. Belgrade Prison. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a pretty bad place. Anyway, but, you know, like a lot of these places, the prisoners basically run the prison, and the guards just sort of keep them under control in that. And anyway, it was very interesting. Gave me a whole different perspective on it that I didn't have before. And I always try to keep that, unless you've been in somebody. I had a good friend that was a female police officer, you know, and she was Cherokee Indian, and she always said, you know, until you walk a mile, is it in their shoes, moccasins, I think it is, you know, and she says, you know, don't judge them until you've walked a mile in their moccasins. And I always thought that was a pretty good saying and perspective on it.
And can you tell us a little bit about how you thought the jurisdiction was going to turn out throughout the trial?
Well, I knew we were innocent. And I mean, that makes it a lot easier. But I mean, I honestly, I thought very easily I could have been in jail for 25 years. Because, first of all, is, you know, here I was sitting behind bars. And, you know, a lot of things had already happened to me that I would not have ever thought would have happened. You know, things that, and it wasn't just that one FBI agent, but I use that as a prime example. But the lies I heard government people saying in that was just like unbelievable. And I mean, there were things that I outright, you know, it wasn't like secondhand saying somebody else thought they were lying. I mean, I knew they were lies. And for that to take place, that really made me uneasy. You know, what else are they capable of? I mean, I think you know, my coming back to Vietnam, people are capable of anything. So, you know, one time I know we were in, I think it was Tallahassee, the guards were going to come into the cell and get us, and we were all going to fight the guards. And, you know, I mean, we thought they were really going to come in, because they had threatened to come in and really beat the hell out of us. And I said, well, we're going down fighting, you know, and because it was at a contempt hearing or something. They'd put us, I don't know if all 8 of us were there. I think it was 6 of us at that time were in there. But, you know, and I'm always learned this, and I learned it in emergency services. Think the worst and prepare for the worst, and then, you know, anything else is great, good stuff. And so that's sort of how I looked at it. I was being prepared for the worst, and you know, if this is what's going to happen, I was going to deal with it. You know, and hopefully, even if we got convicted, you know, the lawyer said, well, there'd be appeals and this, you know, public whatever and that. And, you know, you like to think, oh, how can somebody convict you when you're not guilty? But, you know, I already knew. I was hopefully smart enough to know that there'd been people sent to prison for murder and rape that never did it, you know, and they're there. So, matter of fact, I met the guy when I was in Tallahassee in jail. It was a very famous case in Florida that had been sent to jail for umpteen years. For a rape that he had not committed, and he was let out, and the state did give him some restitution in that. It was a black gentleman. But,
yeah, with the DNA and that they found
right,
many years later.
Yeah, and I think he was like 30 some odd years in jail. I mean, that's, most people, that's half their life. You know, especially a black male, that's half his life. He's been in jail, so.
And, like, when did you hear about Watergate, and like, did you feel that had any role in the events that were going on?
Yeah, absolutely. And sort of knew it because two reasons. One, when we heard about Watergate, there was, what's his name? J. Gordon Liddy Well, we had already heard about what's called Operation Gemstone.
I'm not familiar with that.
That's part of the whole thing that he had come up with. It was him and I can't remember. I'm trying to get different people mixed up. I don't know. Well, I won't because I'll give you the wrong guy. Anyway, one of those other people that was Nixon's crew, they had come up with a plan to discredit what they called the left. And it involved a whole bunch of things. And this was called Operation Gemstone. And J. Gordon Liddy was the one that was going to actually implement it and do all this sort of stuff. And you know who J. Gordon Liddy is, right? I mean, he's a little flaky, in my opinion, to begin with. You know, he's like off to the extreme on what he is. And so when I heard these things that were part of, related, and I just had heard bits and pieces of it, and you'd say, well, why would you believe it? Well, I was so paranoid. I mean, I believed a lot of this stuff, and I believed the government was capable of it from what I was seeing. So when I heard it, just sort of tied it together and wrapped. And I said, well, hell, this is all part of one big plan, to me. But proving it and getting the public to believe that's why Scott and I, during the trial, we actually wanted to have a big defense. And we wanted to bring all that out and use it as a platform to really think. But the other guys were, and I don't blame them, because they just wanted it over with, and I understand that. And some of them, like I mentioned, Alton Fawcett, were really under a lot of psychological stress. And there was another gentleman, I won't say his name, but I think they were having real, not just substance abuse, but other issues mentally, whether they were secondary to that or primary, whatever, from the war, were having some real issues. And I just think it would have been too much for them, and that. And I understand that. And even though I would have, here we had news media from all over the world. I remember the Japanese, somebody from Japan was a television was interviewing us, and I thought, wow, this is really, wow, this is neat, And so this is an opportunity to say what we have to say. They're the ones that drug us in here, so now let's take it. But, there was also the fact that they had sequestered the jurors, so, they wanted to go back to their family and stuff like that. So, listening to the better judgment of the lawyers and the other people that really that know about this stuff, rather than just some idealistic ex-vet, it's an idiot, that way, make that, and, Scott and I were in support of it, but we took a vote, it was Democratic, and out of the 8, and 6 of them wanted to, stop it then, and Scott, because of the way we had structured representing himself, even though he was getting help from the lawyer, he decided just to do one thing like that. So just to close it, and so that's how we ended the trial. And you're probably familiar with the rest of it.
Yeah, we've read a lot about it, but we just want to get a little bit more of your perspective. Like, what was the situation? Just sitting in the trial, listening to the prosecution.
Well, listening to a lot of lies. I mean, some of it was almost funny, and the lawyers were very. They said, you need to not laugh and don't be disrespectful to the jurors. The jurors are important. Their life is controlled by those people, not the prosecution. And there was some witnesses they brought that we thought were friends of ours. The guy, I don't know if Poe, I don't know if you heard about that guy, until he had been at the house where we were all staying and stuff, and this was like one of our buddies. And all of a sudden he's up on a witness stand, and it wasn't just that he was up on a witness stand testifying, and it turns out he worked for them. He had been for the whole time, and he'd been building a case and all this, and we said, well, the stuff he's talking about is the stuff he made up. I mean, this is like a William Leamer, William Leamer would come in and say, well, let's blow up somebody. No, well, let's do this. And then the next thing they're charging all the rest of you with doing what he said. It's like, okay, that's so that kind of stuff was sort of interesting. But I remember we said, well, we had to, and they said to try and, be calm, and you're not guilty. So, and I knew I wasn't. So we played chess and that. And I know one time they had one of the cartoonists that they had us playing chess, and so, but we had, we weren't all in agreement. There wasn't, we weren't all buddies. I mean, I was, like Scott and I were good friends. And I was friends with Alton, but Alton had a lot of problems and issues. I mean, I'm the type of, and I don't know, I think I told you, my family had issues. I mean, everybody in my family, my mom, my stepfather, my brothers, both my brothers, my sister, all had substance abuse problems, both alcohol and drugs. And, 3 of them died young because of that. And so I understood all that stuff. But at the same time, I knew growing up in that the reason I didn't have is because I said, I'm not going to do it. And you know, when drugs are around and that stuff, people want you to, you know, I mean, it's been very easy to do that. And I was, sometimes it's harder not to do things than it is to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I understood that. And I had to try and tell myself, I can't look down on Alton and think he's weak and he's not, you know, and we'd say, well, he wasn't a Marine, he was a Navy corpsman, so that made, you know, even though he's in the Marine Corps, we understand, we have to, you know, they're good guys and we really depended on them to patch us up, but, you know, they're not quite as strong as us, you know, I mean, it's sort of a stupid thing, but we'd say that. And, you know, and he was, you know, he would vacillate back and forth, and I mean, he's also, you know, if you really want to say, it could be looked at as selfish. I mean, he was concerned about one thing, taking care of him, heck with the rest of us. And, you know, the other guy, they had their agendas in that. So, and, you know, prior to all this event, I mean, the only person I really knew was Scott and Alton. I mean, really knew. The other, you know, I didn't know any of the people from Texas and that, other than when they came for all the, you know, the stuff going on in that, the meeting and that. And, but I mean, it's like if you went to a meeting here today and there was 20 people in the house, and you sat there for an hour and they introduced you and you all said hello, and then a month later, the federal government indicts all, and you said you were in a big, you know, you're like, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much in a nutshell. I mean, I'm simplifying it, but I mean, that's sort of what happened.
And can you tell us a little bit about why you think you were found innocent in the trial, and if that would have been different in another part of Florida or in a different state?
No. I think, well, first of all, I think the government had the Guy Goodwin, which was from the Justice Department, the federal end, that actually was directing the prosecutor locally, and that I think that he was people get so much on their particular whatever it is that they're trying to do that they get so wrapped up in it, they don't see the other aspect of it. And I think he was this is the way he wanted to tie us all together for this crime and tie it in, so he had this elaborate story. And I think Jack Caruth, I can't say he's a nice guy, but I think for a lawyer now, just because he's a lawyer doesn't mean he isn't naive and maybe not as smart as he should be. And, you know, I'm not saying I'm any genius, but I think sometimes some people have a hard time looking at things and understanding the differences and seeing that. And I think he was one of those type of people. I think he grew up in, you know, rural type Florida, they call the cracker land or whatever, you know. Not that that's a bad thing. I mean, I know people like that, but I think that his beliefs and stuff swayed his judgment. And you know, the evidence, the thing they brought there was just, some of it was actually almost hysterical. And I remember the lawyers cautious, don't laugh at some of it when you hear it. And I think the jury was pretty educated. I don't remember exactly, but you know, they weren't uneducated jury. I think they were a pretty good spectrum of it to where, and I guess, and I don't know, but just from after the fact talking to them, they communicated enough between themselves what they were, that they really looked at things and saw, I mean, it was pretty obvious to them that what the government was saying wasn't there and it wasn't true. And so, you know, for a big trial, you know, to come back in, I guess it was less than 2 hours. I mean, was like, everybody said, wow, this is and actually that was very scary to us because they said, usually when somebody's found in it, they deliberate, and you know they can't make up their mind. And, you know, for a couple of days go on, then they just say we can't. You know, they're it was so obvious to them, right? I mean, we didn't know this till after they came back, and we talked to them that night. But you know, there was no. And the only struggle they had was trying to see if even one little thing could have been some kind of a crime. You know, and I think that was with Scott. You know, they said no, that, you know, just doesn't even make sense in it. So. So I think that just, to me, it justified our system of justice, you know, because even though you had a lot of shenanigans going on, if you really have people that are doing their part, the jury, that they're supposed to do, and they did take it seriously, you know, it comes to the proper conclusion. And I'll tell you, I was worried about some things. Is, you know, we had what was called collective self-defense, a thing, and we were told, and this was part of Operation Gemstone, was that they were supposed to actually kill some people. I'm not sure to this day who was actually supposed, but to try and make it look like us on Miami Beach and so that they could come in and either totally lock us up forever or kill us. Like, you know, it has happened before in this country. I don't know if you're aware of that. And, you know, with all the other stuff going on, I mean, I wasn't to say that that wasn't going to happen or could happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so if something like that happened, again, like I told you, we were, being Marine, you weren't going to lay down and let a bully take over. You were going to protect yourself and fight fight whatever. And so we had actually talked about that, what we would do in that. But they tried to twist that around and say, oh no, we were planning on doing all this kind of stuff. And then that had never taken place. That was never true. And I actually, no, I'll even go back. And I was concerned at one point, again being paranoid probably, is, was some of the guys planning that, so I confronted it, and nobody that I know of, other than William Leamer, which was a real problem. I mean, that guy was, certifiable. And so there was a buddy of his too that was pretty bad. And I can't remember his name now, but I don't ever hear about him anymore. But there was another guy he had with him. It was like he was way off. He was a real troublemaker. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, this is great. You're giving great answers. Can you tell us a little bit about how the trial affected your involvement in activism, changed your beliefs, reinforced your beliefs?
No, what trials do is they wear you out, and that's part of the government was successful in that point. Mm-hmm. Not only wear you out from financial resources, not that I had any, but the organization, anybody, I was very lucky. Some people I'd never met before, and I won't use their name because I don't know if they want me to use that. And they put up $50,000 for my legal expense. I mean, they gave me $50,000 for that live in Hollywood, and I was just like, they lived in a part of Hollywood that I'd never been in. I'd never even, thought of, where they're wealthy, And these people, and I learned a lot about them later on, about indirectly in that. And they were, activist supporters in the sense of what was right. And, they were, they could relate back to World War II and stuff, and they knew things. And so, but, for somebody to be that kind and do that kind of kindness, and never really ask for anything in return, never want to meet me, anything in that. I know people do that kind of stuff, and that was very impressive to me to do that. But at the same time, what the government was doing is it really destroys organizations, because by then there was so much paranoia and stuff, people you didn't feel comfortable. They make your life hell. They make life hell for your family. It's hard to carry on, and you still do. It's not that I still don't believe and want to do right things, but I look at things differently. And if I wasn't married and wasn't probably I may be more involved in something. I don't know. But again, it does have that impact. And I've talked to plenty of other people that have had similar type of experience, not only the Gainesville Eight, and the same type of things to some degree happen. They definitely has an impact on you, and they do win to some aspect on that. They may not totally discourage you, but you may just take a year off or something and say, I don't want to be involved. I need a break. So that's good, because they're never taking a break. There's people that do that kind of stuff, like a Nixon. Luckily, he caught himself up in that. But those people, he'll just keep going on until he does fall or keep.
Mm-hmm.
And what did you do after hearing the verdict when you were finally done with that? That was now in your past.
Well, yeah, it was almost too hard to believe. But I knew one thing. I had wanted to go back to school, because by then I had transferred from the community college to FIT, Florida Institute of Technology, and I wanted to finish, I wanted to go on and possibly get a job and whatever and stuff. So that was. It was trying to get life back. And it was also to be able to get a job, to make some money, because, my financial situation wasn't very good. And I know that's sort of selfish, but at the same time, and I believe in our society. I'll use the word capitalist in the sense of, you work and you make a living. And I believe that if not functions at the best it can, but I believe our system works really well, and it's one of the best systems in the world, our democratic capitalist system. And it's not. You probably have some changes and tweak to where it'd be more balanced, but I don't believe everybody should be equal in a sense, because not everybody is. I'll give you an example, something that I learned from my family. We both start and both work the same place, but I want to be an alcoholic and a drug addict. That's fine if you want to do that, and you can't. And people tell you, no, you shouldn't do that. It's bad for you, whatever. Don't. And you but say, no, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Well, 20 years later, when you're real sick or you got a lot of problems, don't come and expect me to not, one thing to help you, but to take things away from me to help you. I think that's unfair. That's not right. And if you want to not work and not do anything, that's fine. But you're not going to have things other people are going to have. If somebody works real hard for something, and if they get, but keep that in perspective. I don't believe in like these athletes now that the ridiculous amounts of money they're getting, and some of the businesses. You know, I mean, there's one thing to be a millionaire versus out of control, have so much money and at other people's expense. Because when you get so much out of perspective, it's at somebody else's expense. There's no doubt about that in my mind. And looking at a lot of societies, you can see that. So, you know, I think it's interesting how, like, when you look at certain presidents and stuff when they go in that are not rich, or politicians, how you'll see certain changes in their voting and things like that, but how they become very wealthy and that. Well, they're doing that at our expense. And, you know, I don't begrudge somebody having a business or making money. If you know, they make a shoe that's the best shoe in the world and everybody buys it and they make a lot of money, fine. That's not at somebody else's expense. But when they manipulate things and do things to, you know, take advantage of other people or in their position, I have a real problem like that, you know. And I think right now our country overall, at political corruption is probably at one of the highest levels it's ever been. I just, you know, and I worked within government, and I had minimal type of experiences, but I had people, you know, there was, and I said it was embarrassing. I remember telling somebody it was embarrassing to me to work for a government agency, and this was a local one, that I knew that there was corruption in it and that and stuff, you know, and I know people were going after it, but it was like, you know, you don't want to tell people that, you know, I work for this place. I mean, you have nothing to do with it, but it's, you know, it's going on in that, and so that's upsetting to me, and I think that's happening at the federal level. And that doesn't mean they're all corrupt. There's a lot of good people in government. There's a heck of a lot more good people, I think, in government, and I've known a lot, but it only takes a few bad apples to make everything bad. And we still have a tendency to, quite often, for some reason, to promote a lot of the bad apples more than we do the good apples. Mm-hmm. And we put into, you know, it's like some sports figures. The worse they are, the more accolades and money they get sometimes. I mean, the ones that have been caught outright lying and cheating and all the stuff they've been doing, and yet they get the highest salaries. You know, there's something wrong there. You know, like I was a cyclist, and I actually did some competitive cycling, you know, bicycling. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I thought Lance Armstrong was the greatest person in the world there for a time. And, you know, to me, what he did was so bad. And I think the athletes now, the messages they're sending to young people, you know, cheat, you know, like, I work for the college, and one of the big problems we're having is cheating. It's like epidemic, and they're, you know, you shouldn't have to be trying to find all these ways to prevent people from cheating. You know, it should be like I like saying in the Marine Corps, you know, your honor or whatever. You shouldn't cheat. You should be ashamed to think that you'd ever be caught cheating in that, and you know, stuff. Mm-hmm. It's just a different way of society, you know, change, and I understand it. And you know, I live in a society. It's still a great place to live, and, you know, but hopefully some of those things will change. And you know, I'm not discouraged. I think there's a lot of great young people, and I think there's more good, positive young people than there are negative. But it upsets me sometimes when I see some of the people that make a lot of money, like Lindsay Lohan's and what's her name, the one that was on, I don't know, different things that, you know, they make tremendous amount of money, yet some of the bad messages and examples they send down to the people below. Mm-hmm. And I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you.
And,
I guess you can see how I got into BBAW now, huh? No, opinionated soapbox.
And a little backtracking a little bit to when you were talking about governmental corruption. Can you elaborate a little bit on how you feel that it's changed, if it's gotten worse or just different?
I don't know if it's gotten worse. I mean, there's obviously still political corruption, and you know, one of the things that I think maybe makes a perception of it that it's worse, and when it may not be, is first of all, the federal government seems like it's gotten a lot bigger to me, and I believe that is factual. So much powerful. I don't think it was ever supposed to be as big as it is now, and I think in the power and potential influence it has is like beyond what I think the writers of the Constitution and the people that formed our government did not envision it being. And I think actually a lot of things were to prevent that from happening. The other thing is, I think, whether it's directly, indirectly, and I think it's probably a little bit of both, is the communications that we're exposed to and the way the news media presents things. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean that the news media is outright presenting things like a lie or corrupt or something, but I think that certain TV stations, for instance, or networks, they're very competitive for, the dollars for advertisements. They're competing with each other for ratings and all this. So rather than actually getting detailed, maybe news, factual reports and information out to the people, it's more skewed by what's going to get us the most viewers, what's going to be the most sensationalism, what's going to be the most appealing, and things like that. And I think what happens, and I saw this in government, certainly, if you're one of the people that they like, in the work, we have what we used to call you one of the boys, and you'll do really well. If you're not one, if you're maybe very good at your job, but you sit outside the boys group, whether a girls group, you're not going to go as far, or you're going to have more difficulty, and you're going to be fighting them all the time. And I think that's what happens in the news media. And I think, people want to be very successful, whether it's the newscaster or the people that put the in-depth reviews on and that. So they're always this, whether it's knowingly increasing or, sort of just the culture that does it. And I think that's what's happening today. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
And tell us a little bit just after the trial, just how has your life been changed by it? What are your experiences going forward?
Okay.
How do you reflect on that?
I think I can answer that real quickly. A year after I was on the fire department, they had it was the lawsuit. We had tried to sue the federal government to recover all the money. Well, nowadays you can do that, thanks to Bill Clinton, which I didn't vote for, but thank you, Bill, for now people, if they get abused by the government, outrageously or egregiously, I'm saying it wrong, anyway, if they have one of these bad situations where they've been treated unfairly and that, you can turn around and sue the government. And you actually, we tried to sue the government, and the Supreme Court said, it went to the Supreme Court, and they said, nope, it's federal government. Yeah, you proved, we know that they lied. Guy Goodwin admitted he lied and fabricated a bunch of stuff and that, but you know what, it's the federal government. They can do that. You can't do anything about it. And so what, they ruined your life, or hurt you. That's the way it is. And that's basically what they said. I mean, we have the Supreme Court transcript now, but anyway, because of that, they had a big Sunday paper thing, and I'm at the fire station, and I go in there, and I don't know if you're familiar with fire stations. The one day of the week that they sit around and read the paper is Sunday morning. It's sort of, they treat it as, and they eat breakfast usually. Almost all fire stations, they're all reading. I come into the fire station, right? A lot of them didn't know it. A few people did know it, that I had been involved, but they didn't really understand. Well, they read this whole, had it, like a 5-page spread on the article, and so all of a sudden it was like almost celebrity status from that there, and but even though they really didn't understand some of the reasons but people just, in their mind, they put it in one perspective as to how, but all of a sudden it was, so they'd bring that up a lot, and people have, and I remember my wife said to me, she says, she had a girlfriend that I knew, and before I had gone out with her, and she says, and my wife, we met on the beach. She was running and I was riding my bike, and she had asked her, she says, oh, do you know that guy, my name? And she says, oh yeah, but he has a checkered past. And she says, he was at Gainesville 8, and my wife didn't know that. And all she heard was a checkered past, which means what? It's like you're the mafia or something, whatever, people. So, and I'm very open about it, Joe. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not ashamed of it. There's things in my life, sometimes you say, well, you wish they'd never happen. I mean, who wants to be, through bad things? But I think there was more positive things out of the Gainesville Eight. So if I had to be the person that was the one that, felt some rough things because it wasn't real fun being in jail for a while, or it wasn't fun not having one, you're getting along with people and taking a lot of verbal abuse from people, so be it. There's things, people have had to put up a lot worse than that for things and that. Mm-hmm. So, but I think overall that it had more, the Gainesville Eight trial did have something, I think it brought to light the abuses of the government with these trials. I think I think a lot of people sort of knew it, but it was more the people that were really following that stuff. But after the Gainesville Eight, it became more widespread knowing that this kind of stuff was going on. And I think we can, and then of course it was another little chink out of Nixon's thing, his ladder or whatever, to where it was getting ready to collapse, you know. And so that whole Justice Department and that too, and I think it changed. The sad thing I see was with the new Justice Department now, and the people, and you know, and I believe it's the people they put in there, like they had John Mitchell, you know, and we used to always laugh that, you know, he tried to put us in jail, but he's the one that ended up in jail. And you know, I see that same sort of thing, similarities to that. Not exactly the same, but there are similarities in that with the Justice Department now. And I think the current Attorney General would do anything, just like John Mitchell would, to, you know, keep his power, or keep where he is, or whatever. And that I think, I guess it's sort of a danger to presidents and politicians like that, or people that get in those positions, that immense power they have. And you know how they say immense power corrupts and that. And I think it can do that. Not everybody, but it takes a strong person. And I think one of the biggest things that I have that bothers me, and I look at the elections, and I look at the percentage of people that go out and vote. It's so little. And I try to talk to some people, like my neighbors and stuff, about it, and why they go out to vote. And to me, if I'm voting for a president, for instance, we'll use that as an example, it's critical to me that it's the right kind of character person. His color should have nothing to do with it. His ethnic background should have nothing to do with it. Maybe his experiences in history, because that will tell you a little bit about his beliefs, his moral values, and things like that. Those are the key issues to me. When you make decision, like now, he's making a decision whether to bomb Syria. I'm real concerned about that. And believe me, I'm no dove, you know, never have war, but you know, war is a very big thing, and you know, I just think this could be a terrible mistake. And but you know, it doesn't seem, the things that I've heard from him on TV, the president, and that, and things, very scary to me, very scary at all. And I think partly is, you know, his morals and his beliefs don't jive with mine. And I don't think they jive with most people I know, but yet most of the people I know voted for him. But you know, I asked him about it. I said, well, do you know what his real beliefs are? And I get, that's to me one of my tests, the litmus test, is to say somebody, you know, if you, let's say, well, they're a judge, well, what are his beliefs? You know, most people won't be able to tell you, including myself, about a lot of people. You know, it's and I don't want to say something supports them unless I know a little bit about their beliefs. And I'll say one thing, like, you know, when Scott and at least we felt like we knew each other's beliefs and stuff in it. And I think that's one thing that made us strong during the trial, or, you know, stand up for that.
Do you have any more questions?
No, is there
I
anything
think I
else you
talked
wanna
your ears
talk
off, right? No,
This is
not
good.
at all. I'm through.
Thank you very much
Yeah.
again for being here with
Thank
us.
you
We
so
really
much.
appreciate
You're welcome.
all of your insight and knowledge.
This was great.
Okay, well, I'm glad. Hopefully it was helpful. Oh, I'm sorry. You're still filming?
I am, but I just
Oh,
worked
okay.
hard to stop.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Pleasure. Thank you.